Daniel Penny, the New York City subway rider who choked Jordan Neely, who ultimately died, was just indicted by a New York City grand jury and is now facing up to 15 years in prison. Now, aside from this just being an incredibly polarizing case, you've got people debating about whether or not he was warranted in his actions. There are a lot of implications for self-defense going forward. So a lot rests on this one Neely case. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what it means, but somebody who might is a criminal defense attorney and a guy who was actually a former prosecutor in the Bronx. Michael DeSharo is going to join us. Michael, how are you?
Very good. How you guys doing?
Doing great.
Doing great, Michael. First of all, as a guy you've indicted people before, you've defended people who have been indicted, a lot of people debating about whether or not this charge even should have been brought by the grand jury. You know these things. What say you?
Well, the case had to be brought before the grand jury because the grand jury needs to make the decision. They're the consciousness of the community. So the prosecutor, I believe, had an obligation to bring before the grand jury. And the grand jury today voted to indict Mr. Penny. It's important to understand the grand jury is a complete creature of the prosecutor. They control it completely. And defense lawyers, if their client testifies, cannot even speak in the grand jury.
So I know that his defense is self-defense. That's what his lawyers are putting to the forefront. Is there anything that you would, if you're defending him on this case, that you would bring to the forefront? Because I think the question is at what point, where do you gauge your amount of force when defending yourself? He should still be alive, but should have been restrained. How do you, as a defense attorney, talk to that point?
That is the question. That is what you've hit on. And that is what 12 people are going to decide in the jury box if it gets to trial. So Mr. Penny's lawyers are actually doing a very good job. They have put him out there to give his side of the story. He felt he was in danger. He felt others were in danger. He did not intend to kill Mr. Neely. So that was a tragedy. But in that moment, he's going to argue to the jury that he was justified. And the standard in the law is, and what a jury is going to have to decide is, was it reasonable? Now, let me warn you, I have heard testimony from other witnesses that I've had access to, and they tell a pretty compelling tale for Mr. Penny. But again, it's going to be up to the jury to decide that. And let me predict here, I do not believe this is the type of case, because of the polarization that you spoke of in the beginning of the segment, that any 12 people in Manhattan are going to agree on this.
Wow.
Michael, to that point, it's going to be a jury of his peers and presumably people who have all ridden subways before. It's often a unique experience when you're in a New York City subway. What kind of impact might that have? People who, we're not talking about people out here in LA who may have never ridden on a train before. You're talking about people who know the subway system and what it's like. What about the impact that might have on the case?
Not only that have ridden the subway, but have to ride the subway every day to court.
Yeah.
So these jurors are going to be doing a field test every time they go to court. And look, if you're a juror and you're debating this case and you get on the 4 train from the Upper East Side coming downtown, or the 2 train, which goes through Times Square, let me be clear. There isn't a day now where I take the subway that I don't see some sort of mental illness, not threatening, but people that are in dire need. But I have seen threatening behavior. I've had to defend myself and my son against threatening behavior. So this is a case where this is touching the most rawest of nerves, like the Bernie Goetz case. I know a lot of your viewers are younger. If you Google Bernie Goetz, this has happened before.
So like you said, you get on the subway in New York, you're going to see someone going through some sort of mental episode or something, right? So for Jordan Neely's side of things, right, as they present this case, how much of the mental health conversation will come into this? Because there's something to say there that this is so common and so often, but we don't want to also just open the floodgates for someone else to not make it to tomorrow because this is so often. So does that help them as well too?
That's a great point. And the homeless conversation, the mental health conversation is just there. It's part of our reality. And the mayor, and these are political questions. How much money do we spend? What can we do? The city's put millions of dollars into helping homeless and mentally ill. The problem is when you're on a subway, the doors are closed. There's nowhere to run. So I've heard witnesses describe the event that were actually there in a very favorable light because they were terrified of Mr. Neely. I don't know how a jury is going to do, but I doubt that 12 people can agree on this case once they've listened to all the evidence.
Do you think, though, this ultimately could have an impact, could throw some cold water on Good Samaritans possibly wanting to help in the future, couldn't it?
Absolutely. If Mr. Neely's convicted by a jury, who's going to risk their life? The message then will be, unless you're being actually attacked yourself and really be beaten, don't do anything. That's going to be the message that's going to resonate.
No, absolutely. It's going to be fascinating to watch what happens. Michael DeSharo, thank you so much for your expertise and for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.